Rain hit the office window in sheets the night Jae-won's whole world cracked open. He stood over his desk with a torn photograph trembling between his fingers, his phone buzzing again on the table. 14 missed calls. All from one name. Mother. He didn't answer. He couldn't. Not yet. 3 days before his wedding, his mother had pressed this photograph into his palm and said words he would never forget. If you marry her, you will finally understand why I never wanted you near a black woman. He looked down at the torn edge of the photo. Only a sliver of a woman's face remained, her eyes cut off by the tear, her identity a mystery even to him. Across town, in a quiet bridal shop, Amara stood in front of a mirror in her wedding dress, completely still. Her reflection stared back at her, but her mind was somewhere else, back inside a cardboard box she'd found 3 days earlier, back inside a letter with handwriting that made her chest tighten every time she thought about it. I didn't tell him what I found either, she whispered to no one. Neither of them knew the other was carrying a secret. Neither of them knew those secrets were about to collide. Before we go further, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from tonight. This one's going to take you somewhere unexpected. 48 hours earlier, none of this had a name yet. Jae-won had built a life that looked, from the outside, like something out of a magazine. Successful architect. Composed. Respected. He'd dated women from every background his mother approved of over the years, models, doctors, daughters of old family friends, and none of them had lasted. He used to joke about it with his college roommate, half laughing, half serious. I've dated them all, man. Every type there is. Except, and he'd trail off, never quite finishing the sentence, because some part of him already knew the sentence was ugly. Black women were never his type. He'd said it so many times over the years that it had stopped feeling like a choice and started feeling like a fact about himself, the way some people say they don't like coffee or don't like the color yellow. He never asked himself where that fact came from. He never had to. Not until Amara. He met her at a fundraiser 8 months ago, the kind of event his mother loved dragging him to, full of people with soft handshakes and sharp opinions. Amara wasn't supposed to be memorable. She was standing near the dessert table, laughing at something on her phone, completely unbothered by the room full of important people around her. You're the only person here who looks like they're actually enjoying themselves, Jae-won had said, immediately regretting how awkward it sounded. Amara had looked up, unbothered, amused. That's because I'm not trying to impress anyone. I just came for the shrimp. He'd laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. They talked for 2 hours that night. She told him about her nonprofit, about raising her late husband's teenage daughter as her own, about how grief teaches you to stop performing for people and just live honestly. He told her things he didn't usually tell strangers, about the loneliness underneath all his polish, about how tired he was of dating people who fit a mold instead of people who fit him. By the end of the night, something in him had shifted, quietly, permanently. He started seeing her in secret at first, not because he was ashamed, but because some old instinct in him already knew his mother would have questions. Real questions. The kind that don't have comfortable answers. 3 weeks in, he brought her flowers on a Tuesday for no reason at all. You didn't have to do that, Amara said, smiling as she took them. I wanted to, Jae-won said. Is that allowed? It's allowed, she said softly. I'm just not used to it. That line stayed with him longer than she probably meant it to. Their relationship deepened the way real things do, slowly, through small ordinary moments. Sunday morning phone calls that lasted 3 hours. Amara teaching him how to properly season a pot of greens while he stood in her kitchen pretending he already knew what he was doing. Him showing up unannounced with soup the week she caught the flu, sitting on the floor beside her bed just to keep her company. You didn't have to stay, she murmured one night, half asleep, fever still lingering. I know, he said. I wanted to. 6 months in, he proposed. Not with fireworks or a big audience, just the two of them on her back porch at sunset, her daughter peeking through the curtains pretending not to watch. I've dated a lot of people trying to find someone who felt like home, Jae-won told her, voice shaking slightly. I didn't know home could feel like this until you. Amara cried before she even said yes. But underneath all of it, One thread had been quietly unraveling. Jae-won's mother, Mrs. Han, had welcomed Amara with polite smiles and careful words, the kind of warmth that never quite reached her eyes. She asked questions that sounded innocent on the surface, about Amara's family, her mother, where she grew up, but there was always a strange tightness in her voice whenever those questions came up. 3 days before the wedding, Mrs. Han asked to speak with her son alone. Before the wedding, she said, "There's something you need to know." Her tone didn't match her words. Something underneath it trembled. Jae-won sat across from his mother in the quiet of her sitting room, sunlight slicing through the blinds in thin gold lines. He could feel his own heartbeat in his throat. "Mom, whatever this is," he said carefully, "just say it." Mrs. Han's hands were folded so tightly in her lap her knuckles had gone pale. For a long moment, she didn't speak at all. When she finally did, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Ask Amara about her mother," she said. "Ask her, and then decide if you still want this wedding." Jae-won felt something cold slide down his spine. What does Amara's mother have to do with any of this? Mrs. Han's eyes glistened, but she didn't answer. Instead, she reached into the drawer of the side table and pulled out the torn photograph, the one he would later stand over in his office at midnight, rain hammering the window, his entire understanding of his family quietly falling apart. "This," she said, placing it gently into his palm, "is where it started." Jae-won stared down at the sliver of a woman's face, torn and incomplete, and felt the ground shift beneath him. "Started what?" he asked, his voice barely holding steady. "Mom." "Started what?" Mrs. Han closed her eyes, and for the first time in his entire life, Jae-won watched his composed, unshakable mother's hands tremble. "Something I should have told you a long time ago," she said. "Something that's about to walk right into this family whether I say it or not. That's where we're going to pause for now. If this story already has your heart racing a little, drop a like, leave a comment telling me what you think Mrs. Han is hiding, and subscribe so you don't miss part 2. Trust me, this one gets deeper. Stick around." Jae-won didn't sleep that night. He sat on the edge of his bed until the sky outside turned pale gray, the torn photograph resting on his nightstand like something radioactive, something he couldn't touch again but couldn't look away from either. By morning, he'd made a decision. He needed to talk to Amara before he let his mother's words plant any more doubt in him. He found her at her office, sorting through folders for an upcoming fundraiser, her reading glasses pushed up into her curls. She looked up when he walked in, and her smile faded the second she saw his face. "What's wrong?" she asked, standing immediately. Jae-won closed the door behind him gently. "I need to ask you something. About your mother." Amara went still. Something flickered behind her eyes, quick and guarded, gone before he could name it. "Why would you ask me about my mother?" she said carefully. "Because mine handed me this yesterday," Jae-won said, pulling the torn photo from his jacket pocket, "and told me to ask you before I decided if I still wanted to marry you." Amara's breath caught. She reached for the photo with shaking fingers, and the moment she saw it, her face changed completely. "Where did she get this?" Amara whispered, more to herself than to him. "You recognize it," Jae-won said, his stomach dropping. Amara sat down slowly, the folder in her hands forgotten on the desk. 3 days ago, I was clearing out my mother's old storage unit. I found a box of letters I never knew existed. One of them mentioned a woman named Mrs. Han. I thought it was a coincidence. I didn't want to say anything until I understood it myself." Jae-won felt the floor tilt beneath him. "So this isn't a coincidence?" "I don't think so," Amara said quietly. That evening, Amara brought the box of letters to Jae-won's apartment. They sat together on the living room floor, papers spread between them like pieces of a puzzle neither of them had asked to solve. "My mother never talked about her life before I was born," Amara said, running her fingers over the yellowed edge of an envelope. "Not really. She said the past was the past. I always thought she meant it lightly. Now I think she meant it like a warning." Jae-won picked up one of the letters, his father's handwriting instantly familiar even after all these years. His chest tightened. "This is my father's writing," he said. Amara looked up sharply. "Your father knew my mother?" They read through the letters together, slowly, carefully, piecing together fragments of a story from decades ago. Jae-won's father and Amara's mother had known each other long before either of their children were born, back when they were young and the world hadn't yet closed in around them with expectations and fear. The letters spoke of long conversations, of shared dreams, of a friendship that clearly meant something to both of them. Nothing scandalous, nothing dramatic on its own. But threaded through the later letters was something heavier. Regret. Apology. Loss. One letter, dated only months before Jae-won's father passed, stopped them both cold. "I hope one day your son finds the courage mine never had," it read, the ink slightly faded, but the words sharp as glass. Amara's hands trembled as she read it aloud, her voice breaking on the last line. "What does that mean?" Jae-won whispered. "Courage for what?" Neither of them had an answer. Not yet. A few days later, Jae-won returned to his mother's house, the letters in a folder under his arm, his patience worn thin. "I need the truth," he said the moment she opened the door. "Not fragments. Not warnings. The whole truth, Mom." Mrs. Han's face went pale as she led him inside. They sat across from each other in the same sitting room as before, the same golden light slicing through the blinds, but everything between them felt different now. "Your father and Amara's mother were close once," Mrs. Han finally said, her voice thin. "Before I married him. They were friends, real friends, the kind of friendship that made me feel like I was standing outside a room I could never fully enter." "So you were jealous," Jae-won said slowly. Mrs. Han's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "I was young and afraid, and I let that fear turn into something ugly. I said things to her. Things I am not proud of. She left the community not long after. I told myself for years it wasn't my fault, that she chose to leave. But I know now I made staying impossible." Jae-won sat in stunned silence, his mind spinning to reframe everything he'd believed about his mother's prejudice. "So this whole time," he said quietly, "your issue with Amara was never really about her. It was about guilt you never dealt with." Mrs. Han's composure finally broke, tears sliding down her face. "I told myself it was tradition. Protection. I dressed my guilt up as wisdom and passed it down to you without ever questioning where it came from. I'm sorry, Jae-won." "I'm so sorry." He sat there, heart aching for the mother in front of him and the woman he loved waiting at home, both wounded by the same silence carried for over 2 decades. That night, he told Amara everything. They sat together on her back porch, the same spot where he'd proposed months earlier, the sky dark and quiet above them. All this time, Amara said softly, staring out into the yard, "I thought my mother just didn't want to talk about her past. I never imagined she was protecting me from a wound that was never mine to carry." Jae-won reached for her hand. "I'm sorry my family caused that pain." Amara turned to look at him, her eyes soft despite everything. "You didn't cause it. And you didn't run from it either. That matters more than you know." He squeezed her hand gently. "There's still one more thing. My mother said there's something else, something she wants to tell us both before the wedding." Amara's breath caught. "Do you think it's worse?" Jae-won shook his head slowly, though uncertainty still lingered behind his eyes. "I don't know. But whatever it is, we're facing it together. That much I do know." Outside, the wind stirred the trees gently, carrying with it the quiet feeling that the final piece of the story, whatever it was, waited just around the corner. If you're still here with me, that means this story has its hooks in you, and honestly, it's about to get even more emotional. Drop a comment and tell me what you think Mrs. Han's final secret could be. Hit like if you're hoping for a happy ending, and subscribe now so you don't miss the conclusion. We're almost there. Let's finish this together. 2 days before the wedding, Mrs. Han asked Jae-won and Amara to come to her house together. She'd never done that before, never once invited Amara in without some careful distance between them. This time felt different. Her voice on the phone had been soft, almost fragile. They arrived just as the sun was dipping behind the trees, painting the sky in soft orange and pink. Mrs. Han met them at the door, and for the first time since Amara had known her, she reached out and took both of Amara's hands in hers. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "Both of you." They sat together in the sitting room, the same room where so much had already been said, but the air felt lighter now, like something was finally ready to be released instead of guarded. Mrs. Han reached into a small wooden box on the table beside her and pulled out a folded piece of cloth, old and delicate, along with a sealed envelope that had clearly never been opened. "Your mother gave this to me," she said, looking at Amara, the week before she left. "I never gave it back to her. I told myself I would when things settled, when I found the right words. But I never did. I let my pride keep it locked away for over 20 years. Amara took the cloth carefully, her fingers trembling as she unfolded it. Inside was a small handmade bracelet, delicate beads threaded together, clearly something crafted with love and patience. "She made this for me," Mrs. Han said, her voice cracking. "During a summer when we were still close, before everything I ruined." She said it symbolized two lives woven together, stronger for the difference in their threads. "I was too ashamed to keep it in sight, so I hid it away. I convinced myself hiding it meant erasing what I did. It didn't. It just meant I carried it in silence for far too long." Amara's eyes filled with tears as she held the bracelet gently in her palm. "She never mentioned this. Not once." "She wouldn't have," Mrs. Han said. "She was too kind for that. That's exactly why I felt the way I did back then, why fear turned into something I'm still trying to undo." She reached for the sealed envelope next. Her hands were trembling as she held it out to Amara. "This is the letter I never sent back. Please open it. It belongs to you now, not me." Amara opened it slowly, her breath catching as she read the words written decades earlier in her mother's warm, familiar handwriting. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't bitterness. It was hope, plain and simple, a wish that someday, somehow, their two families might find their way back to each other without the weight of old fears standing between them. Amara looked up, tears sliding freely down her face. "She forgave you," she whispered. Even after everything, she still hoped for this. Mrs. Han broke down completely then, years of guilt finally spilling out of her all at once. Jae-won moved to sit beside his mother, holding her as she cried, while Amara reached over and gently took her other hand. "Thank you for finally telling us," Jae-won said softly. "For letting this go." Mrs. Han looked between the two of them, her voice barely above a whisper. "I almost let my fear cost me my son's happiness. I won't make that mistake again." The morning of the wedding arrived warm and golden, the kind of light that makes everything look softer, kinder. Amara stood in front of the mirror in her dress, the same dress from before, but everything about the moment felt different now. Lighter. Whole. Around her wrist, she wore the bracelet her mother had made all those years ago. Jae-won waited at the altar, his heart pounding, watching the doors at the end of the aisle. When they opened and Amara stepped through, sunlight framing her like something out of a dream, he felt every doubt, every secret, every painful revelation of the past few weeks fall away completely. Mrs. Han sat in the front row, tears in her eyes, but this time they weren't tears of guilt. They were tears of release. As Amara reached the altar and took Jae-won's hands in hers, he leaned in close and whispered just for her. "I used to think love had a type," he said softly. "I know now it just has a name. Yours." Amara smiled through her tears. "Then I guess we found our way to each other exactly when we were supposed to." They exchanged vows under the golden afternoon light, two families finally healed from a wound carried silently for over 2 decades, brought together not by chance, but by the quiet courage to finally tell the truth. Sometimes the love we're taught to fear turns out to be the very thing that heals us, if we're brave enough to listen past the silence and choose truth over pride. If this story touched your heart even a little, let me know in the comments which part moved you the most. Hit that like button, share this with someone who needs a little hope today, and if you're new here, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. I have so many more emotional journeys like this one waiting for you on the channel, so go check those out too and follow along for what's coming next. Thank you for watching until the very end. I'll see you in the next story.